Hey, how you doing? So today I'm gonna discuss what I remember about when I got hairy cell leukemia. I got hairy cell leukemia. I was treated for it. In another 3 months, it'll be 14 years, and so far I haven't relapsed. My guess is at the 14-year mark, about 70% of the people have relapsed already. I don't know how accurate that is. That's just there's not a lot of data that you can find on hairy cell leukemia. I think there's only one researcher in the United States who researches it full time. That may even be in the world. I don't know. Only about somewhere between 500 to 1,000 people in the U.S. get it a year. So it's a very rare form of leukemia. However, it's probably the best form to get. It's the most treatable. So the first treatment, you tend to get the most time, and then when you relapse, you don't get as much time. You're probably like half the next time. So anyway, I used to walk around my block a lot, and my block many years before had been a racetrack. And so it was exactly a mile around the block. So I'd, walk around the block a couple of times. And that was probably the most likely reason that I got hairy cell. From the sunlight, from walking around the block. They think that sunlight is the most likely cause of hairy cell. People who get hairy cell tend to be like athlete types. They're not like schlubs sitting on a couch eating Cheetos. They're guys, people who spend time outside, they're runners, marathoners, bikers. They tend to be pretty healthy type, well, what you would think would be healthy type people. And hairy cell is caused by a very rare reaction to sunlight, too. So, there I am trying to be cautious and doing the right thing, and I got unlucky. So that's how it is. So anyway, what I can remember is walking around the block, and I didn't have much energy, and I could, instead of walking a couple miles, I could barely walk a quarter mile, and I was always in denial of anything. Health, I just figured it had to be nutritional. I kept taking more aspirins, but I used to take a lot of aspirins anyway because I used to get a lot of sinus headaches, like a real lot of sinus headaches. So, and there were some strange things happening. I remember, once going to the pharmacy and buying a blood pressure machine. And I guess remember there were just some weird things. I remember, like, someone's dinner was delivered to my door by mistake. And I remember eating it, and I just remember being very hungry. And so anyway, one day, I was just very tired, and and my eyes started to get bloodshot. Look at my eyes. I was really, and I remember visiting, my mother, and she's saying that I looked terrible. So anyway, I was on the phone with a friend of mine. I'm in New York. This friend of mine in Florida, and he noticed, that I didn't sound right. I don't think he said anything to me. And the next day, he called an ambulance. And that sound you hear in the background, there's something boiling some water, so you'll hear that. So anyway, so my friend calls the ambulance. I didn't know this. I get up, I think it was a Friday morning, and ambulance comes to my house. I remember when it came to the house, there was the policeman with them, and the policeman demanded to go up to my place and to look around, and this is without me. I have no idea if he stole stuff, under the guise of looking for drugs. I don't smoke, I don't do drugs or anything like that. So I don't know if he stole anything or not. I remember being in the ambulance trying to convince the guys to let me, to go back, and they were, giving me tests. Went to the hospital, and my father had, where I lived, my father had one friend ever, who was from that town, and he happened to be the head of the hospital. And my father knew him in the Army, from way back when, and, they were asking me who I am and this and that. I didn't have any identification with me. And I told them that, my father was a good friend of this guy, Bernie's, and, so I guess it was checked out, and all of a sudden, all sorts of special foods coming to me, and my relatives came there. I remember, them, where I was, and they told my relatives that I had about a 50-50 shot of making it through the first night. Usually when you go in with hairy cell leukemia, you don't feel well, you go to the doctor, and you get it relatively early. But I got it. I've only seen one person on the internet who waited as long. I mean, I would have waited till I was dead. I mean, that's how I am. So, I was lucky that that friend of mine called, the ambulance. So anyway, so I spent 4 days in the first hospital, and they figured out what I had. It took them 4 days. And then I was transported by ambulance to another hospital, and I spent a total of about 6 or 7 weeks in the hospital. And, lots of blood transfusions or some. And, when you're in the hospital, you realize that there's all sorts of people who are trying to make money off you. All these doctors coming in often for no reason, and, they're charging this, it's very, so, they gave me the cladribine. I remember a lot of people visiting me. I couldn't see very well, so I couldn't read or anything. I couldn't see TV, and I would walk around the halls, and I had a lot of energy, more than other patients, and they would always have to say to me, slow down, slow down. And I had a big problem in the hospital. I had a rash, related to the drugs I was getting, like an allergic reaction, and that was terrible. Like a full body rash. It was very painful. Extremely painful, and I mean it felt worse than the hairy cell at the time. And the rash goes up and down your body, and there were all sorts of scabs on my body from it. I had to steal like a pair of surgical scissors because they don't trust you with them, and I would cut like the dead skin off from that. It was just not too much fun. And when you're in the hospital, you learn which are your good friends and which aren't. There were people I thought I was friendly with that I talked to all the time or whatever, who, I heard from once, and that was it. They didn't, and there were other people I wasn't that friendly with, and they came up to bat, and they were very helpful. I remember that my taste buds changed, so that I had desires for certain really specific foods. At one point I wanted spaghetti with white clam sauce. I had a friend of mine bring it over. Little did I know that he got it from a pizzeria, and he couldn't get over to the pizzeria for hours, and I left it on top of an oven, so it was spoiled. I didn't know it. It tasted good, and I started throwing up, which was pretty egregious of a friend to bring over, food like that to somebody who's sick in the hospital. I had 3 roommates in the hospital. I know the first 2 died. The second one I'd actually met in real life before. There was a guy that I knew from a health club. It was his father, and I'd once met him. He died too. And the last person, was a young guy. I don't know what happened to him. While I was in the hospital, at that time I rented, my landlady called me and said that she offered to help clean up my place, and my place got messy because I was so sick for a few months. And so she went up with her daughter and her daughter's friend, and stuff was missing when I came back. I think it was the daughter's friend, about thousands of dollars worth of stuff. I would estimate maybe $15,000 worth of stuff easily. But at least I survived, and that was the only time I ever had any significant amount of things stolen from me. Well, in that respect, I had a bad experience with the Wells Fargo, but that was a different type of thievery. Anyway, So yeah, I spent 6, 7 weeks in the hospital, and when you're there so long, and you tell people that you're going to get out, they think you're institutionalized. They don't believe you, and I just basically didn't do anything. I have an ability to be able to just sit and not do anything, just to think. I don't know how I can do that. But they gave me the cladribine for 24/7. 24 hours a day for a week. I remember the first few days weren't too bad, and the last couple of days were really bad. I remember losing a fair amount of body hair, and it cleared out my sinuses, which I used to get a lot of sinus headaches, and that cleared them out. So for a couple of years, I didn't get sinus headaches, which was actually helpful. Generally the nurses were very good. The doctors. There were some strange things that I remember, but I'm not going to go into. I was a little kind of delusional. And prior to going in the hospital, I said some strange things to some friends and got mad at people. And some of those people don't talk to me today because of that. It wasn't my fault. I was sick. These people, I guess, held me to what I said, even though I was very sick with leukemia. But there's nothing you can really do about that. That includes, some friends and relatives. There's one story that I'll tell you from before I went in the hospital. There was a park right near where I lived, and I would go down there and I would shoot baskets. I thought maybe that I would get better from that. And I remember, this is like a day or two before I went in the hospital, going down to the park. And so I go down to the court, and I go to the corner of the basketball court, where you can't see any of the backboard. And the first shot goes in. I'm a very good shooter in baskets. I can't play one-on-one. I'm a disaster, but I can shoot baskets really well. I have good hand-eye coordination. So I go down there. So then I notice that there's about 10 black guys, standing one in back of the other, trying to copy the same shot I did. And these guys probably go down to the court like every day, And it kind of it was kind of a cool feeling. Little did they know that I was going to spend close to the next 2 months in the hospital, almost dead. I just thought I'd tell you some of my experiences with getting hairy cell, and so that's it. And for any of you that have it or know someone that does, good luck.